Cinco viudas Apache lamoran a su puerta, y cambiaron para siempre la vida del ranchero. The rancher lived far away from towns and busy roads, in a place where the land stretched wide and quiet in every direction. His ranch stood alone under the open sky, surrounded by dry fields, low hills, and long fences that seemed to disappear into the distance. Life there was not easy, but it was the only life he knew. Every morning he woke before the sun, pulled on his worn boots, and stepped outside to face another long day of work. He had built this life with his own hands. The small wooden house, the barn, the water well, and the animal pens were all the result of years of effort. There was no one to help him most days. If something broke, he fixed it. If an animal fell sick, he cared for it. If food was needed, he hunted or grew what he could. The land demanded strength, patience, and silence, and the rancher had learned to give it all three. People rarely visited him. Travelers avoided the area because it was known to be rough and lonely. The nearest settlement was many miles away, and going there meant losing a full day of work. Over time, the rancher stopped making the trip unless it was absolutely necessary. He found that being alone felt safer than trusting others. Out here, silence did not lie, and the land never pretended to be something it was not. His past had taught him to be careful. Years earlier, he had lost people he cared about, friends who had tried to build lives in the same harsh territory. Some left because the land was too hard. Others never returned from journeys they had taken. Those memories stayed with him, shaping his thoughts and actions. He learned to keep his distance, to rely on himself, and to close his heart against hope. Stories passed from traveler to traveler had also left their mark on him. He had grown up hearing warnings about danger beyond the fences, about groups of people who lived differently and were often misunderstood. These stories were filled with fear and anger, and over time, they shaped how he saw the world. Even though he rarely encountered anyone, those old tales stayed alive in his mind, guiding his reactions long before reason could. The rancher did not think of himself as cruel or unkind. He simply believed that survival came first. In a land where food, water, and safety were never guaranteed, kindness felt like a risk he could not afford. He told himself that emotions were a luxury for people who lived in safer places. Out here, strength mattered more than sympathy. His days followed the same pattern. At sunrise, he fed the animals and checked the fences. Later, he worked the fields, repaired tools, or hauled water. When the sun reached its highest point, he rested briefly in the shade, watching the sky and listening to the wind. In the evening, he prepared a simple meal and sat alone by the fire. Night brought deep quiet, broken only by distant sounds that reminded him how small one man was in such a wide world. Despite his efforts to stay hardened, loneliness crept in during those long evenings. As the fire burned low, memories returned uninvited. He remembered laughter, shared meals, and voices that once filled the silence. He pushed those thoughts away, telling himself that remembering did no good. Still, they lingered like shadows that followed him no matter how far he walked. The land itself seemed to understand his solitude. The dry soil, the stubborn plants, and the endless sky mirrored his own rough nature. He respected the land because it was honest. It gave nothing without effort, and it never promised comfort. In many ways, he felt more connected to the earth beneath his feet than to any person. He had learned to read small signs, changes in the wind, marks on the ground, the behavior of animals. These signs kept him alert and alive. Trusting his senses had become second nature. Any unusual sound or movement caught his attention immediately. Living alone meant being ready for anything, even when nothing happened for weeks at a time. At times, he wondered if this was how his life would end, quietly, without witness, known only to the land he worked. The thought did not frighten him as much as it once had. He had accepted that his path was different from others. Marriage, family, and community felt like distant ideas from another world. Yet, beneath his hard exterior, there was still a part of him that listened when the wind changed or when the night felt heavier than usual. That part remembered what it was like to care, to hope, and to belong. He rarely allowed himself to acknowledge it, but it was there, waiting. On one particular day, the air felt different. The sky held a strange stillness, as if something unseen was approaching. The rancher noticed it but dismissed the feeling. Life had taught him not to expect change. He finished his work as usual, unaware that the quiet routine he depended on was nearing its end. As the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness settled over the land, he locked his doors and prepared for another silent night. He believed tomorrow would be just like today, and the day before that. He had no reason to think otherwise. He did not know that the door he closed that evening would soon be opened in a way he never imagined. The solitude he had built around himself for years was about to be tested, and the life he thought was fixed and unchanging was standing at the edge of something entirely new. The night had fully settled over the land. The sky was dark and wide, filled with quiet stars that looked cold and distant. Inside the small house, the rancher sat near the fire, eating a simple meal. The sound of the wind brushing against the walls was familiar, almost comforting. Nights were usually like this, long, silent, and predictable. Just as he was about to rise and put out the fire, a sound broke the calm, a knock. At first he thought he had imagined it. Visitors never came at this hour. He sat still, listening. The wind blew again, but then came the sound once more. Slow, careful. Real, his body tightened. His hand moved toward the lamp, but he did not light it yet. His heart began to beat harder, not from fear alone, but from surprise. Whoever stood outside had crossed miles of empty land in the dark. That alone meant trouble or desperation. He stood quietly and stepped closer to the door. He did not open it right away. Instead, he spoke through the thick wood, his voice firm but controlled. "Who is there?" What he saw made him freeze. 5 women stood on his porch. They were wrapped in worn clothing, their faces pale under the moonlight. Their eyes reflected exhaustion more than fear. They stood close together as if the cold and the long journey had pushed them into one small space. Dust covered their clothes. Their hands were empty. The rancher felt his breath catch. Old stories rushed into his mind, warnings he had heard since childhood. His first instinct was to step back and close the door tight. His muscles tensed, ready to protect what little he had, but something stopped him. These women did not look like a threat. They looked tired, hungry, lost. He opened the door only a small amount, enough to speak but not enough to feel exposed. The cool night air rushed inside. "What do you want?" he asked. One of the women stepped forward slightly. She was older than the others, her face marked by deep lines, her eyes steady despite her weakness. She spoke slowly, choosing her words with care. "We need help," she said. "We have nowhere else to go." He noticed the way they leaned on one another, the way their shoulders drooped with exhaustion. He saw no signs of danger, only long travel and great loss. Still, his mind argued with itself. Helping them could bring trouble. Turning them away could mean something worse. "Why here?" he asked. The woman looked down before answering. "We heard there was a man who lived alone. A man who worked the land. We hoped he might listen." The world seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he opened the door a little wider. "Come inside," he said, his voice rough, "but only for a short time." Their clothes were thin and torn in places. Their hands were rough and cracked. Their eyes carried sadness that no words could fully explain. He gestured toward the fire. "Sit," he said. They obeyed, lowering themselves carefully onto the floor and nearby bench. One woman let out a deep breath as if she had been holding it for hours. Another pressed her hands close to the warmth, her fingers trembling. The rancher stood apart, unsure what to do next. He was not used to company, especially not like this. The room felt smaller now, filled with quiet breathing and unfamiliar presence. After a moment, he brought out a pot of water and placed it over the fire. He said nothing as he worked, his movements slow and careful. When the water warmed, he offered them cups. They accepted with nods of thanks. No one rushed. Every action was measured, respectful. Time passed quietly. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. Finally, the older woman spoke again. "We are widows," she said simply. "Our husbands are gone." Loss had a sound of its own, and he recognized it. "We were left alone," she continued. "With children who are now grown or scattered. We walked for days. We asked others for help, but many turned away." He remembered doors that had stayed closed. He cleared his throat. "You can stay until morning," he said. "After that, we'll see." Some rested against the wall. Others closed their eyes, holding onto the warmth as if it might disappear. The rancher sat in his chair, watching them quietly. His mind raced with questions, but his heart stayed strangely calm. For the first time in years, the silence felt different. It was no longer empty. Outside, the wind softened. The land lay still under the stars. He knew that when morning came, nothing would be simple. Choices would have to be made. Old beliefs would be challenged. The careful life he had built might begin to change. But for now, in this shared space of firelight and quiet breathing, he allowed the moment to exist. 5 knocks on his door had already altered the rhythm of his life. And deep inside, though he would never admit it out loud, the rancher sensed that this night was only the beginning. Morning arrived slowly, with a pale light spreading across the land. The rancher woke before the sun, as he always did, but this time something felt different. For a brief moment, he forgot he was not alone. Then he heard soft movement near the fire and remembered the events of the night before. He rose quietly from his bed and looked into the main room. The 5 women were still there. 2 sat awake, warming their hands near the fading fire. The others rested against the wall, wrapped in borrowed blankets. Their faces looked calmer in the daylight, but the signs of long travel and loss were still clear. The rancher stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the cool morning air. He looked over his land, the fences, the animals, the wide open space that had always belonged only to him. Bringing others into this world felt strange, almost wrong. Yet closing the door on them now felt just as heavy. He fed the animals as usual, though his mind wandered. When he returned to the house, he found the women already awake. One of them had carefully swept the floor with a small brush she had found. Another had stacked the cups neatly on the table. They moved with quiet respect, as if trying not to leave a mark. "You don't have to do that," he said, more sharply than he meant. The older woman looked up. "We don't like to be a burden," she replied calmly. Her words stayed with him. He prepared a simple breakfast and shared it with them. No one spoke much at first. Each person seemed unsure of where they stood. The rancher noticed how carefully the women watched his reactions, as if measuring every movement. After the meal, he cleared his throat. "I need help around here," he said. "If you stay, there will be work." The women worked quietly and steadily. They repaired torn cloth, helped tend the animals, and cleaned the living space without being asked. They spoke little, but when they did, their words were thoughtful and careful. The rancher kept his distance. He watched closely, always alert. Old fears did not disappear overnight. Still, each day passed without harm, and slowly, tension began to loosen. One afternoon, while repairing a fence, he noticed one of the women working beside him. She did not complain about the heat or the rough ground. She simply worked, focused and patient. When the fence was finished, she nodded once, as if satisfied, and moved on to the next task. That night, as they sat near the fire, one of the women told a short story about her childhood. It was simple, about learning to gather food with her mother. There was no sadness in her voice, only memory. The others listened quietly. The rancher found himself listening too. Over time, small moments like this became more common. A shared laugh over a stubborn animal, a calm conversation about the weather, quiet understanding during hard work. The rancher realized that the fear he had carried for so long was slowly being replaced by something unfamiliar: trust. One evening, a strong storm rolled in. Rain fell hard and the wind shook the house. The animals grew restless. Without a word, the women helped secure doors, calm the animals, and bring supplies inside. They moved as a team, calm and steady. When the storm passed, the rancher felt something close to gratitude. Later that night, the older woman spoke again. She shared how her people believed the land listened to those who respected it. She spoke of balance, of helping one another to survive hard times. The rancher did not interrupt. He felt no need to argue. Days turned into weeks. The ranch no longer felt like a place of silence alone. It became a place of shared effort. The women respected his rules and he slowly relaxed his guard. Meals were no longer eaten in silence. Stories were exchanged, not deeply personal but honest. The rancher noticed changes in himself. He slept more peacefully. He laughed more easily. The land seemed less heavy when shared. One afternoon, while resting under a tree, he admitted something he had never said aloud. "I thought I was better off alone," he said. The women did not answer right away. Then one of them spoke softly. "Being alone keeps you safe," she said, "but it also keeps you empty." That night, as the fire burned low, the rancher understood that his life was no longer the same. The people he once feared had shown him kindness, respect, and shared strength. The walls he had built inside himself were beginning to crack. He did not know what the future held, but for the first time in many years, he did not face it alone. And that knowledge changed everything. The changes did not happen all at once. They came slowly, like the way morning light moves across the land. At first, the rancher did not notice how much his thoughts were shifting. He still woke early, still checked the fences, still watched the horizon with care. But inside him, something was different. The women had become part of the daily rhythm. Their presence no longer felt strange. It felt expected. Each of them had found a place in the work of the ranch. One was good with animals and seemed to understand their moods without effort. Another had strong hands and repaired tools with quiet skill. One kept the living space clean and organized, turning the small house into a place that felt warm instead of empty. The older woman guided the others, offering calm words and steady judgment. The rancher watched all of this with growing respect. One evening, as they prepared food together, he noticed how naturally they worked as a group. No one gave orders. No one rushed. Each person knew what to do and did it with care. He realized that for many years he had believed strength meant standing alone. Now he began to see another kind of strength, one built on connection. That night they sat by the fire longer than usual. The flames moved gently, lighting their faces with a soft glow. The wind outside was quiet. It felt like a moment meant for speaking. The older woman began to talk about the past, not just about loss, but about life before it changed. She spoke of family gatherings, shared meals, and laughter around the fire. She spoke of teaching children to respect the land and to listen before acting. The rancher listened without interrupting. Her words did not sound weak or broken. They sounded wise. When she finished, silence filled the room. For once, the rancher did not rush to end it. Instead, he spoke. "I used to believe trusting others only brought pain," he said slowly. "I told myself I didn't need anyone." In the days that followed, the rancher found himself sharing small parts of his own story. He spoke of the people he had lost, of the time he stopped believing in a future beyond survival. He spoke of nights when the silence felt louder than any noise. He did not share everything at once, but each time he spoke, the burden felt lighter. The women listened with patience. They did not try to fix his past. They simply allowed him to speak. One afternoon, while repairing a water channel, the rancher slipped and injured his leg. The pain was sharp and sudden. In the past, he would have dragged himself inside and dealt with it alone. This time was different. Before he could say anything, the women were there. They helped him up, guided him inside, and cared for the injury with calm focus. No panic, no blame, just help. As he rested, staring at the ceiling, something inside him broke open, not in a painful way, but in a freeing one. He realized how much effort he had spent pushing people away, how much strength he had wasted on fear. Recovery took days. During that time, the women managed the ranch without complaint. The animals were fed, the fences were checked, the house stayed in order. The rancher watched from the doorway, humbled. When he was strong enough to work again, he thanked them. The words felt unfamiliar on his tongue, but they were honest. They accepted his thanks with simple nods. As weeks passed, the ranch began to feel like a shared home. Meals were filled with conversation. Laughter appeared more often. Even the land seemed kinder, as if responding to the care given to it by many hands instead of one. The rancher noticed that he no longer jumped at every sound in the night. The constant tension he had carried for years had softened. He slept deeper. He dreamed again. One evening, as the sun set in deep shades of orange and gold, the rancher stood beside the older woman, watching the horizon. "I never planned for this," he said. She smiled slightly. "Life rarely asks for permission." The room fell quiet. The women looked at one another, surprised. "You are sure?" one asked. He met her eyes. "This place is better with you here," he said. "And so am I." They thanked him, but more than that, they showed it through their actions, their respect, their continued care for the land and each other. That night, as the rancher lay in bed, he understood something important. The change he had feared had already happened, and instead of losing himself, he had found a part he thought was gone forever. He was no longer just surviving, he was living. The future did not arrive suddenly. It unfolded one quiet day at a time, shaped by shared work, honest effort, and growing understanding. The rancher no longer counted the days by loneliness or fear. Instead, he measured time by what they built together. The ranch changed in small but meaningful ways. The land was worked more carefully. Crops were planted with patience, not rush. Animals were handled with calm voices instead of force. The women brought knowledge passed down through generations: how to read the soil, how to protect plants from harsh weather, how to respect nature instead of fighting it. The rancher listened. That alone marked how far he had come. People from nearby areas began to notice the difference. Travelers who once avoided the land now stopped to ask for water or rest. They saw a place that felt alive instead of guarded. The rancher greeted them with caution but not coldness. He was still careful, but he was no longer closed. The women remained humble and quiet, never seeking attention. They worked, cooked, repaired, and shared knowledge without asking for praise. Their strength showed in how steady they were, even when memories of loss returned. Some nights were still heavy for them, but they faced those moments together. One evening, a visitor stayed longer than usual. He spoke of trouble in the region, of fear spreading among people who did not understand one another. The rancher listened, feeling an old tension rise in his chest. In the past, such news would have pushed him deeper into isolation. This time, he did not shut the door. After the visitor left, the rancher spoke openly with the women. They discussed the risks, the uncertainty, and the need to stay aware. There was no panic, only careful thought. "We will protect what we have," the rancher said, "but we will not live in fear." As seasons passed, the ranch became a place of balance. Hard work was shared, rest was respected, decisions were made together. The rancher found himself laughing more easily, speaking more openly, and worrying less about being alone. He realized something important. The land had never asked him to suffer in silence. He had chosen that path himself. One day, as they repaired a fence under the warm sun, the rancher paused and looked around. The women were working nearby, talking softly, focused but calm. The land stretched wide and peaceful. For the first time in his life, the future did not feel empty. That night they gathered around the fire as they often did. The flames flickered gently. The air was warm. The older woman spoke again, her voice steady and thoughtful. "Life gives us many paths," she said. "Some we choose, some are chosen for us. What matters is how we walk them." The knock on his door that night long ago had not taken anything from him. It had given him something: purpose, connection, a future shaped not by fear but by trust. As the fire burned low and the stars filled the sky, the rancher felt peace settle deep within him. The land, the people, and his own heart were finally in harmony. The door that once stood closed now remained open, not just to others but to life itself. And that changed everything.